Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Jake Ward. I'm the president of the Connected Commerce Council. I'll be your host today for an event that we are proud to co-host with the Florida State Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, as well as the Miami-Dade County Chamber of Commerce, to discuss a number of issues, but not the least of which is small businesses and the tremendous lengths they've gone to over the past 18 months to deal with a changing environment, a complex economic situation, and the difficulties brought on by the pandemic. Specifically, we're going to hear from some Florida small businesses and representatives, as well as Senator Brandes from Florida State Senate, who's going to join us in just a few minutes to discuss some of the initiatives going on at the state level, as well as some of the stories that he brings to us as a voice for small businesses in the state Senate. The Connected Commerce Council, for context, is a small business resource and advocacy group that represents more than 15,000 small businesses around the country and works with those small businesses to help them get access to the digital tools and resources they need in the best of times. As we all know that these are not normal times. Access to small businesses is the thing that has enabled tens of millions of American small businesses to survive the pandemic, and lack of that access or lack of understanding of how best to use those tools and services was part of the thing that led to mass closures of small businesses around the country and certainly in Florida. We're going to hear some of the survival stories today from small businesses, as well as some of the lessons we've learned. Over the past 2 years, the Connected Commerce Council has conducted extensive research to find the lessons that we can take away from this disaster. The situation is rare, certainly, but it is not uncommon for there to be regional disasters, for there to be economic crises, for there to be circumstances in our states and in our communities that hit small businesses first and hardest. And as an advocate for small businesses, we've worked hard to find out how the safety net that can catch those small businesses works, what the tools that comprise that safety net, and how we can all work together to give it some more bounce. So with that, why don't I throw it over to Senator Brandes, who will say a few words, and he and I are going to have a conversation about some of the lessons we've learned and things we can do. Senator, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Great, my pleasure. It's exciting to talk about the great things happening here in the state of Florida. You know, Florida's growing by about 800 people a day, and many of those are going to come in and start small businesses, and it's exciting to see the growth of this great state. We know that growth is largely focused on the Miami-Dade area, the South Florida area, Orlando, the Tampa Bay market, Jacksonville, and the Panhandle. So we really see growth throughout the state, and it's exciting to kind of, as we emerge from the pandemic, it's exciting to see the stability that Florida is providing. One, by just keeping its doors open and making sure that Florida is open for business and that people know it. We're seeing businesses move here from New York and from Connecticut and from Michigan as people escape higher taxes and move to a state where they feel like they can grow, and frankly, a state that wants them here. So I think there's a lot of great things going on in the state, and some areas that we're consistently focusing in on. I think Florida's education environment is getting better. Florida is a state that offers more school choice than almost any other state in the country. And that is something parents look for when they think about relocating businesses. When I talk to my employees at my business, one of the key things they want to know about is what's the education environment like. And it's great to tell them that while we have great public schools, we also have the option for parents to choose a variety of different educational options for their kids. And that's incredibly powerful when we're talking about attracting new talent to the state. Beyond that, we have great universities. Our university system is consistently ranked amongst the top tier in the country for public universities. And that just provides a pipeline of talent for small businesses to grow through. Not only that, but it also provides an innovation pipeline that helps fuel new ideas into the system. One of the things I started working on back when I was originally elected back in 2010 was the future of transportation, recognizing that the future had three major components to it. It was getting more shared, it was getting more electric, and it was getting more automated. Over the last 12 years, we've really built a platform in Florida that recognizes those three trends, whether it was when we brought Uber and Lyft to Florida and really allowed them to begin to deploy and let people really kind of become entrepreneurs on their own as drivers and broke up what had historically been a taxi monopoly across the state of Florida to the shift towards electrification, where today just 2% of vehicles on Florida's roads are electric. We think by the end of the decade that's 15 to 25% of all new cars sold will be electric, to the automation that we're seeing. And that is something that we're really driving and seeing grow in Florida. One of the key areas that we're really focusing right now is how do we get more angel investors and more the ability to do more venture capital in the state. I think it's one of the areas we've really been missing out on, and one of that we've got to continue to focus in on. And so that's how do we continue to attract that talent? The money is here. It's largely focused in the population centers, but they want to deploy it here, and they want to find businesses that will grow and thrive in Florida. And so I think Florida is uniquely positioned. One, because you don't have to deal with the regulations of California. Two, you have this great economic environment. And three, we're close to both South America and Europe in a way that California and other states out west just aren't, and can't really compete in that market. So we have the ability to really be the gateways of the Americas, which is really what Florida is in many ways. So excited to talk about what's going on in this great state and what we're doing and some of the challenges I see coming ahead. Look forward to the conversation.
Senator, thank you very much for that. It's sort of interesting. One of the lessons that we learned from the research that we conducted during the pandemic was that those small businesses that utilize a diversity of digital tools and services were more readily prepared for crises, that they could pivot, they were more agile, they could take their businesses online, they could diversify, they could reduce cost. It occurs to me that is actually a pretty good model for state government as well. Mm-hmm. That the more of a framework you can put in place that has investment in infrastructure, in a widening and deepening tax base, investments in entrepreneurial efforts, as well as trying to draw in non-population based centers, is a really good way to build a state government effort focused on technology. Can you tell us a little bit more about the sort of the public-private ideals of a Florida government that you imagine, the investments, where you would put that money and why?
Really, it's, I think as we kind of emerge out of this world of uncertainty, one of the kind of key themes that I try to impress upon my colleagues is that we should focus on ideas that maximize our options for the future, right? And it's like a venture capital, right? It's a venture capital is, you're investing in 20 companies, hoping that 3 or 4 are really going to work. Of that portfolio. Largely what we need to be doing is focusing on the base things, the things that are really going to provide value for the long term. At the state level, it's how do we make sure that we're funding our infrastructure? Florida's home to 14 deep water seaports. We have 23 million residents in this state. The new census numbers continue to come out over the next few days. But what we're going to find is Florida's on this huge growth trajectory. We have to manage that and meet those growth demands by investing in infrastructure. And that's not just roads and bridges, that's technology infrastructure as well. It's making sure that we're committed to 5G. The state's already made significant policy moves towards 5G, making sure that we have that infrastructure available, not just in our urban communities, but in our rural communities as well. It's making sure that you have an education platform so that people feel universally that there's a quality education provided to the K through 12 and higher ed students that we have. And then it's ensuring that innovation pipeline continues, that you're being able to feed the demands of small businesses that are pushing the new ideas, that are coming up with new business models, and that we're embracing those.
I think that's right. I don't think it's a surprise to anybody who's been to Florida that 8 of your cities ranked in the top 50 of best places to start a business by Inc. magazine. That shouldn't come as a surprise. Between the weather and the lack of income tax, I'm not sure why anybody wouldn't want to live in Florida. Right. There is a sort of a remarkable thing that you keep triggering on, which is the idea of public investment in public-private partnerships, and that overcoming the barrier to entry for small businesses particularly, and enabling them to be more digitally empowered, to have access to more tools, to more resources, can be often is the difference between success and failure. And in tough times, in crises like we've had over the last 18 months, it's the number one signifier of success or failure. I wonder if you have any, and I'm putting it on the spot a little bit on this, so I apologize, if there are any specific ideas that you have or that are being considered at the state level to invest in public-private partnerships. You mentioned the seaport, for example. That's here in Charleston, that's a continuous focus of investors, equity and venture, and small businesses trying to take advantage of ways to create efficiencies and redundancies to improve trafficking and ways of monitoring security, et cetera, at the port level. But it's also run by the state, right? It has a highly regulated space, and that partnership is often an obstacle to success. And I wonder if you have some ideas on how to break through that barrier.
Well, I think the first thing that the state needs to do, for the most part, is just get out of the way. Oftentimes, the rules and regulations are really what kneecap and cobble many of the small businesses in Florida. And I think we've done a good job with that over the last few years, whether it's our legislation on home-based businesses, which radically expands what the business operations you can do at home, or our continued investment in our key infrastructure portfolio. To me, those are the things that we have to get right in order for businesses to grow and thrive. Anybody who's watched any shows about what it's like to do business in California or England or other places realize that there is just tons of government paperwork before you can kind of get anything started here. So to me, it's how do we simplify? How do we attract small businesses to the state? And we can do that in a couple of different ways. I always think of it like I'm a scuba diver, so I think of it as like, how would you establish a new reef if we were going to do this? One, and get fish to come to that area. One, the state can chum the water. It can throw tons of money and try to attract businesses. And what we've seen is once the money runs out, the businesses go away. Or we can focus on our small businesses. We can attract small businesses and continue to work to grow those small businesses into bigger businesses over time until eventually we have an established ecosystem of businesses. But it's really thinking about our overall business economy as an organism and not a system. Organisms, they grow, they overcome, they adapt. Systems grow and then ultimately fail. So how do we continue to think of this overall, the overall group of businesses as an organism that needs to be grown over time, but also needs to be focused on adapting? And how do we create an environment that allows them to adapt?
I think that metaphor is very apt, particularly the long-term sustainability that comes with diverse systems, an organism that can build on itself, that it becomes simpatico with its community, and that creates a relationship with surrounding markets, emerging markets, and continues to grow. The origin of Silicon Valley is often lost in translation. It's not a bunch of rich people that went to Silicon Valley. It's the money that was created because the microchip was built there, and all of that minting that went on from the people that came out of Intel that created Silicon graphics and all of the components that then led to the invention of the computer that we see. What's going to be Florida's computer? What do you imagine is the industry? It's possible that it's broken up into regions. Florida is such a diverse.
I actually think it's a few different things. Well, first of all, recognizing that I don't see a new computer coming out or something that's like that, right? Florida's main industries are really tourism, agriculture, are the two main ones. But I actually think finance is going to be probably the third on the list, as we come down. And finance has a lot of different connotations to it, right? It could be in the insurance side, where Florida is one of the most dynamic insurance markets in the world. And I think you're going to continue to see that. We're already seeing businesses and investment firms moving out of New York and Connecticut and moving to the state of Florida. I think finance it's something that, especially with the digital tools available, is something that's so portable. When you can have client meetings and it doesn't matter where you are. But at the end of the day, and during the pandemic, Florida's was one of the only places in the country you could go and have a client meeting face to face. So it's, how do we keep the rules in check? How do we recognize that businesses want to thrive? And then how do we foster the business environment? Because if you can get finance, you can get angel investors, and you can get some organization and venture capital. And then when small businesses want to grow, we can do seed rounds through exits in the state. Historically, that just hasn't been something that's been Florida's strong suit. But I think it's one of those areas we've got to continue to make investments in. And that's not really state investments, other than it is to foster groups and try to incentivize more venture funds to establish themselves in the state, because that's going to help businesses grow to ultimately achieve that exit.
I think that's right. Let me ask you to do a little concern trolling. What could get in the way? What is it that government could do, that the environment generally could do, that would stop that success? Because you're clearly on an aggressive trajectory. So
one of the most challenging issues in Florida is the tort environment that we live in, and the litigation that we have here in the state. Florida is kind of nationally known as a judicial hellhole. And that's largely because if you think about the largest firms in the country, most of them are grown and bred in Florida. And that has created a huge problem. We see this not only in property insurance, where we see rates going up 20 to 30% a year, largely because of litigation. But we also see this with small businesses that have fleets that are having to pay, and trucking fleets that are having to pay huge premiums in order to get insurance in the state of Florida. And just businesses in general that are hiring and firing employees on a regular basis to try to get the right mix of people to work for them. And my company and the companies that I talk to on a daily basis, it's not uncommon for somebody to leave that company for legitimate reasons, and then for that business owner to get a lawsuit because that person left or was terminated. That environment has to change. It's one of the things that I think is really the Achilles heel of the state of Florida, is the litigation environment, and one that will keep people from bringing businesses and how hurts businesses that are trying to grow. And one of the reasons that I proposed the COVID liability bill this year, that was, I think, one of the strongest in the country to help businesses have some certainty. The one thing that businesses hate is uncertainty. And it's such a huge part of growing a business is you're growing this business in an uncertain world. You may know the markets you want to go after. You may know what your product is. You may know how to sell something. But if it's the other uncertainty, especially the type of litigation uncertainty that emerges in a state like Florida, that I think really is something we've got to continue to deal with at the state level.
Uncertainty is, without a question, the number one killer of small businesses.
Right.
It's never been easier or cheaper to start or run or grow a small business. But the instability in markets and the uncertainty that can come with regulatory upheaval or shifting responsibility and liability. I hadn't thought about Florida's labor laws. That's really particularly interesting. So when we ask the question, as advocates for small business, when we ask the question, what can we do as an organization that represents small businesses and tries to put more tools in the hands of those businesses so that they can run and grow their business? As a representative, as a member of the state Senate, what is the relationship between organizations like mine and state governments that we should find ways to support not only the existing small business and startup community, but future small businesses?
Yes. So I think
some ideas.
Yeah, the key thing for organizations like yours is you're really a business intelligence arm, right? You see literally hundreds of different businesses and you hear trends that are growing in those businesses. The one thing the legislature doesn't have a lot of is exposure directly to businesses. I mean, it has maybe exposure to large hospitals and other providers in different spaces. But in the small business frame, in the small business world, I think it's important that they understand what small businesses are going through. It's important that you come visit your legislators. I mean, it would be interesting to do a survey of how many of the people of the organizations that you represent, how many have actually know their state senator's name, have ever met their state representative, have know people on their city council, because those people, honestly, in the world of politics, what happens in your state is oftentimes much more meaningful to your business and what's happening federally. So building that relationship with your local elected officials, but then also as an organization, providing that business intelligence and saying, here's what the businesses are saying they need, and here's what's hampering growth for them. I think what you find is the legislature and this governor will go all in to help businesses grow and thrive, but they need to know what the challenges are so that we can begin to address those at the state level if that's something we can do.
That's great, and thank you for that invitation. As we started 3C, our hope was to stay out of advocacy for the most part, and instead be sort of resourced directly to the small businesses. But increasingly, we found that both at a state and federal level, small business voices were going unheard, not because the policymakers didn't want to hear from them, they just didn't know where to find them. And small businesses are too busy running their business, trying to survive, trying to maintain a foothold. And so a significant part of our activity became conversations like this, and direct advocacy on any number of issues, from taxes and opportunity to privacy and antitrust regulation, and how that trickles down. Our belief is that every issue is a small business issue, and if you don't have a seat at the table, you are almost certainly going to be on the menu.
Absolutely. Look, small businesses get affected by state law a lot more than big businesses do. The ripple effect of state policy absolutely will crush a small business. I mean, I have a small microbrewery here, which was not able to have customers for a significant portion of last year. Even though restaurants could open, they could serve food. So what did we end up doing? We ended up investing in a peanut butter and jelly food truck to bring on property so that we could open our brewery, so we could check the box of having a restaurant technically on site. It's those types of things that, unless people think through the ramifications of their decisions by saying, we'll let a restaurant open, but breweries have to keep their doors shut, aren't thinking through the ramifications of that. And I think it's up to organizations like yours that frankly have to be involved in advocacy, because that's really where you can add the most value to your clients.
I love stories like that. The idea of small business ingenuity is really the reason that we go to work every day. It's like, yeah, we can solve that. It's peanut butter and jelly truck right here.
Yeah, check the
with
box.
A pretty good, exactly, pretty substantial audience of Florida small businesses on the line and watching through the YouTube channel right now. Do you have any advice for them as they hopefully round the corner and come out of pandemic times and think about where to invest their energies and their time and their money in the next 6 to 12 months?
Look, I mean, I think there's so many great areas of the state of Florida that are thriving. And I think there's so much opportunity. The addressable market in this state is huge. The fact that we have 23 million residents and 180 million tourists, I think that given with the tax environment, the growth that we're seeing all over the state of Florida, there's so much opportunity to be had in the state. I think my one piece of advice is focus on those things that maximize your options. As we kind of emerge from this time of uncertainty, there's a reason that when we're driving, we slow, and when we drive into fog, we slow the vehicle down, we turn the radio off, we're peering intently out the window, right? In many ways, that's a great analogy for operating a small business, because what you're really doing there is saying, all right, I need to focus on maximizing my options because I don't know what lies on the road ahead. To me, oftentimes as a small business owner, that's what it feels like. And so I think it's very important that we purposely think about how are we maximizing our options for the future, because we don't know exactly how this market's going to shift. Is the housing market going to continue to be on fire for the next 2 or 3 years? Maybe, but we don't really know. Is there going to be some variant that's going to bring us back inside? I don't know, but we need to be focusing on those things that provide us the maximum options, especially during this time of uncertainty.
That's great. Thank you very much for that advice and for your time today, Senator. We really appreciate it. I'm going to say thank you and bring on our next panel. We have 3 representatives for this: Julio Fuentes, the president and CEO of the Florida State Hispanic Chamber of Commerce; George and Gina McGuire, who are the owners of Glass Crafted Stained Glass. They're somewhere on my screen; and Reginald Andre, the Technology Council representative and CEO of ARK Solvers. There you are. Hey, guys. I'm going to ask you to do a quick round of introductions, and then we'll dive right into the panel. Julio, why don't we start with you since you're on the far right of my screen?
Thank you for having me here, Jake. Again, my name is Julio Fuentes. I'm the president CEO of the Florida State Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. We are the only statewide economic development organization representing the needs of our Hispanic business community. You were talking about advocacy there with the senator, and that's what we do best. We serve as that voice to the Hispanic business community at a state and federal level. So we've been at this we just celebrated our 21st year anniversary earlier this year in February, and a lot more work to do.
Wonderful, thank you. And thank you for joining us. Reginald, you want to jump in next?
Yes, hello, thank you as well, Jake, for having me. Reginald Andre with Arc Solvers. We are a cybersecurity and IT management company here in South Florida, representing Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties. And we're essentially a outsourced IT company for businesses that are in the verge of anywhere from 5 to 50 employees where they can't justify having a full-time IT person. And I also represent the Miami-Dade Chamber of Commerce in their technology department.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I'm sure there's a number of potential clients on the line right now who are thinking, I could use an IT guy. George and Gina, why don't I throw it over to you for introductions real quick?
Great. Good afternoon. We're Gina and George McGuire. We have a store called Glass Crafters in Sarasota, Florida, which is a stained glass crafts resource center. We have classes in-house, and we sell tools and supplies, custom commissions and repairs. And I think we're actually kind of a jewel in Sarasota. We're a draw. People come to Sarasota on purpose just because our glass store is here.
It's always nice when you can pack in an audience, right? Welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. Why don't we jump right in? We're so far on time, so I'm feeling pretty good about that. Julio, why don't I start with you? As you mentioned, your organization represents. Ooh, I'm getting a little bit of feedback. Can you guys hear that? No. Okay. Julio, your organization represents Hispanic businesses across the state. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you learned, what you saw among your members from the community that you represent over the past 18 months? What have you learned? What do you know now that you would have been surprised by 2 years ago?
Yeah, so the Florida State Hispanic Chamber, we represent well over 600,000 Hispanic-owned businesses here in the state of Florida. It's about a quarter of all businesses in the state of Florida that contributes roughly about $90 billion to Florida's economy each year. So obviously it's a large number. So the pandemic obviously impacted the Hispanic business community earlier on when we were in the heart of the pandemic. Stanford University did a study or a survey that found that 86% of Hispanic-owned businesses reported the pandemic had significantly negatively impacted their revenues. And the same report found that roughly 65% of Hispanic businesses felt that they would not be able to continue operating beyond 6 months. And obviously, this is focused on Hispanic businesses, but that's clearly probably a fair number across the board for all businesses. We obviously saw the federal government step in with PPPs, SBA loans, disaster loans. So there was a cluster of capital that was accessible that really helped out these small businesses, kind of find their way through these rough times. What we did find was a lot of the smaller businesses felt that PPP, for example, was not for them. I'm too small of a business. It's only me, and two employees. And that was really a big outreach, educational campaign for us that, no, you absolutely can have access to these dollars, and you have to go after it if you want to, obviously stay in business. So we spent probably a good, 6, 7, 8 months just pushing away at that fact there. So, we're eager to see, probably later on this year, what that number looks like now of Hispanic-owned businesses, where we're at, who has survived, who hasn't survived, who still needs that help. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
One of the things that we found in our digitally driven report last spring, and then again this past fall as we refresh those numbers, is that there's no good time to have a global pandemic, and it is a tragic event. But this was certainly the best time in the history of business and society that this could have happened, right? That the access to tools like this, to taking our businesses online, to ways of creating inventory and outlets for retailers and service enabled, we think conservatively, 11 million small businesses to survive the pandemic that would have even 5 years ago been out of business like that, right? That this is a remarkable instance of the resilience of small businesses, and the Hispanic community in Florida particularly is no exception. In fact, I think it's sort of a crown jewel of that achievement. I wonder if there's any advice that you would give your members or even the community as a whole, as Florida and the country starts to rebound economically, as we hopefully sort of get through Delta and get on the other side of this. What advice would you give to your members and to the small business community?
Well, there's no question that the use of technology for small business is something that's a game changer. I mean, we did notice the folks those small businesses that were already set up, if you will, with e-commerce, for example, or kind of had their technology already platform established, kind of went into the pandemic, and saw this bigger opportunity, to really capitalize on this platform that they already have existing. Those that did not, or maybe that were early on in the process, really kind of were pushing themselves through it, had to figure out, finding, again, these are small businesses that don't have the resources to pay a larger company to help them, kind of establish themselves like others. But that's something that really came out, out of this pandemic, is I really love the way technology, small business companies were making themselves available to another small business, and whether it was at a discounted rate, whatever the case may be. But it was just such a I don't know. It was encouraging just to see kind of the that space come together and kind of help each other out, and we're seeing companies that really had a very little platform in technology kind of really immersed, to a different company than what they were as early as 8 months ago. So, obviously, if you're not in it, if you haven't established yourself yet, it's obviously never too late. But technology is obviously the way of the future.
George and Gina, it sounds like he's talking about you guys specifically, just ears ringing, right? Like this is the idea of having a destination for folks to come to Sarasota and see your store and see your products is, I'm sure, heartwarming, but being able to survive a pandemic when people couldn't do that is also reassuring. Can you tell us a little bit about sort of the transition that you went through and how you managed to deal with the ebb and flow of being able to have your doors open and folks in person?
Sure. First, we were already online, of course, before the pandemic with several digital tools, which I think the primary need there is to meet our customers where they're shopping. Mm-hmm. And even the 10,000 people that I email or the ones who follow us on Facebook always look for us there. They go back to Google My Business to get our phone number or even to find our website again. So for those folks who couldn't physically come to the store, it was important for us to be able to stay in contact with them and communicate with them as to what's going on at Glasscrafters, what's happened with the store closure and how they could still do curbside pickup of their supplies, or even ask a question and direction. It was interesting in the pandemic that people went into their craft rooms, right, and did their hobbies, and they needed more help, more support. There were more questions than ever that needed coaching. We were able to go onto Facebook Live and do a pop-up video right there, even interacting with some of those folks, and get 30 or 40 other people who just happened to be watching Facebook pop in and watch the demo as well. So these digital tools have been critical elements of our business, where we switched from what used to be a 75% store, 25% online, to the other. We're more 75% online now. And I think we saw that happen anyway. Everybody saw retail world moving online. even before the pandemic. The pandemic just pushed it forward. We just jumped 5 years forward in our volume of online merchandising.
We saw and we have seen for years this idea of a digital transformation where this type of thing would happen. There was a lot of talk about it, and larger companies could invest billions of dollars over decades to do it. In 18 months, we saw the small business community sort of be forced into this digital transformation. And I think if there's any sort of silver lining, it's going to be the resilience that comes from being tested over a long period of time and forced to make clarifying decisions about where to put your resources and where to put your time. One of the things that you just said, George, about how you were already online, you were already doing online sales and inventory is so core to this idea of the digital safety net, which is the concept of the more tools and resources a small business has, the more likely it was to survive and to bounce back faster. But the fifth tool is not nearly as important as the first one, right? The decision to go online, decision to start to digitize an inventory, or to make decisions about your backroom infrastructure or your online advertising or your website, that initial decision is worth months of crisis funding and years of survival in the darkest of times. I wonder if there's any advice that you would give some of the folks that are on joining us today about how to make that decision, how to overcome the barrier to entry of education or money or time or just fear of not understanding now that you've lived through the benefits of it.
Well, I would encourage others that the online presence is actually an environment where you can control the conversation. You know, businesses used to like to rely on word of mouth advertising. Friends would tell their friends about us and they'd all come over. But you didn't have any control over what they were saying. Even in today's world online with comments, you can use a negative comment for a positive spin. You use it as a platform to educate all the other viewers who are going to read those comments as to what your policies are, what your hours of operation are, or clarify what your services can provide. So it's a really unique and powerful way to communicate, even for a local business, I would say. He wasn't trying to e-commerce sell products to mail around the world we do, but just want to draw folks to come to their physical location. The more information you can put online about yourself, the more comfortable shoppers are going to be, the more likely you're going to win their business.
That's right. That's exactly right. Reginald, let me throw this over to you with a concept that we've been talking about for a couple of years, that small businesses create a small stack, that companies like George and Gina's will have a Google Mail client on advertising and analytics that they take off the shelf, a CRM that they integrate into their platform, and various forms of back office, you know, QuickBooks, so on. And that's a small stack. It's comprised of low cost, highly secure, scalable tools and technologies, and they build their own sort of tools. At some point pretty early on in the process, particularly if you're dealing with regulated data or coming anywhere near the need for a higher level of customized security, you turn to somebody like you, somebody whose business is based on creating small business tech stacks. Tell me a little bit about what you saw over the past 18 months in terms of new business, folks coming to you, the questions that they were bringing to you, and the problems that you were solving.
Yeah, absolutely. The biggest thing is I need my employees to be able to work from home, and all of my information that is at my office, I need them to be able to access that from home and secure. So that was, I would say, in the past 18 months, for those companies that weren't on the cloud or using any type of digital tools, is to how to ramp up that process, or maybe they were in that process of going there. How do we get them overnight, having all of their employees be able to work from home and secure?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I wonder, you know, is this permanent? Are we moving into a world where every meeting, or at least 90% of meetings, looks like this, and therefore needs to have a deeper level of integration, not only into our lives, but into our tech stacks?
You know, I definitely think so, because even in our company, I'm just a couple of years old, just waiting for my lease to be over, and I'm just going to have everybody work from home. And I think that just makes technology even more needed, because now instead of supporting one office with 30 employees, you're now essentially supporting 30 employees at their home office. And just the web of things that's going to have to just now need to have the staff be able to interconnect, but separate. I think that's just going to be a lot of new business and opportunities.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. One of the issues that we advocate for at a state and federal level is around access to those off-the-shelf tools that I mentioned before, because they are so inexpensive and because they offer small businesses the necessary security around data management, around liability, just general sort of that's taken care of certainty. And whether it be Google or access to Amazon's marketplace or Infusionsoft or Salesforce, right? That those tools empower people to make better decisions. As a small business, you need to be able to do better math, right? Your analytics need to be better. You need to be able to compete at a more granular level than your larger competitors. And so I wonder if you have a word of advice for people joining us today about what tools that they should use or what tools they should consider using, and how to think about that as a strategy that is a benefit rather than a burden.
Yeah, absolutely. So, even 5 years ago, it was very difficult to get enterprise level software for be it your CRM, your email, for storage. And now you can essentially play with the big boys, the same thing that the banking industry is using, the same thing that the education market is using. You can do that now on a subscription basis, be it Microsoft, Amazon, whoever the companies are, but for as low as $5, $6. They have different packages where you don't have to get the highest tier if you're just at the beginning and you're in a tight budget and you just need the basics. So my biggest advice is, yes, there is needed. There are needs for custom, but also look at what the bigger players are doing and see if you could just integrate. You can just use one of those, because integration is a big key now. You want all of these tools to talk to each other. So see what these companies are offering. See what type of API and integration that you can do so that your finances is talking with your CRM, which is talking with your quoting system, and just make sure that all of these tools talk to each other.
Wonderful. That's great advice. Thank you, Reginald. I really appreciate it. I'm going to wrap up now. So let me say thank you to you. Thank you to Julio, George, Gina, Senator Brandis. Thank you very much. Thank you to our co-hosts. We really appreciate it. For more information about the research that I referenced a couple of times, connectedcouncil.org is our website. There's also some additional resources and information on there from events like this from around the country and in Florida as well. We are more than happy to work with small businesses anywhere in the country to address their needs from a technology standpoint, from an integration standpoint, as well as how to solve the problem of growing and sustaining business in a crisis. Hopefully we're coming to the end of this thing pretty soon, but until then, we'll all be there to support you and to work with you as we work through this. So thank you again, everybody, for your time. I'll talk to you again soon. Thank you.